Welcome to another edition of Ryan's Recap. On today's show, we're going to give you the big news stories. And we have a guest who is a human activist who's going to talk about racial discrimination. I'm very excited for this show, so let's get started. We start off with Harvard University. They're taking their students and they don't want them to be setting up any groups that are only male or female oriented. For this, we're going to take a look at a package I made on the issue. Harvard University is trying to end gender discrimination in student organizations by discarding all male societies, fraternities, sororities, and other groups that only accept men or women. Harvard says undergrads who join unrecognized single-gendered organizations will not receive dean recommendations for scholarships and will not be able to hold high leadership positions on campus. This is in an effort to alter Harvard students from joining groups excluding men or women, but Harvard will not prohibit students from the organizations. Harvard officials said they had to act to uphold the principle of non-discrimination. And along with what Harvard's doing, overall, they also are going to take away scholarships, the Rhodes and Marshall scholarships. And this decision, their president said it was kind of based off the heels of the 31% of Harvard women who reported experiencing a non-consensual sexual contact over the course of last year. And overall, about 30% of the people on the Harvard campus, they're in these clubs that are only male and female. So I'm going to just throw in my own opinion to this because I find that if you're going to make things co-ed and then bring the gender together, I don't know if the president of Harvard has a great explanation for this, saying that we're going to bring them together and it's over sexual assault. Because you bring together boys and girls, there's no telling what the future could be for Harvard. And I don't know if this is a move that they're going to overall look back and regret, and they're going to overall feel discriminated in the sense of only allowing men or women to join these groups. So this is obviously a story we're going to have to keep up to date on. And now we have breaking news. This is coming out of an Egypt airplane traveling from Paris to Cairo. It has crashed into the sea. There were 66 people on board. And the Egyptian civil aviation minister said the chances of this being an act of terror were higher than those of it being a mechanical failure. At some point before dropping off the radar, the plane had swerved 90 degrees to the left and then made a 360-degree turn to the right before dropping 1,500 feet, 10,000 feet, and then disappearing from radar, according to Greek officials. And overall, there were also automatic messages sent from the smoke, about smoke being in the aircraft just before it crashed. So it may not be terrorist related. They're trying to keep updates on this story, but it did say that the flight indicated smoke alerts that occurred in the cockpit minutes before the crash. And we move on to the political race, where Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, they're doing many things to highlight gun violence. Overall, Donald Trump, he's at the National Rifle Association, and he's been talking more on the side of having guns be a common thing, allowing guns, because he believes more in protecting against terrorists, and it's actually a big change in what Hillary Clinton overall has said. Because Hillary, she's going up to the mother of Trayvon Martin and also parents who have lost children due to gun violence, and she's always been against it. So this might be something to really look for in the political race, because as NRA spokesman Jennifer Baker said, if you cherish Second Amendment rights, the stakes have never been higher than they are in this election. So overall, we'll see what happens. But Trump, he also likes to make a big deal about him carrying a permit for a concealed weapon. And he thinks that this is something that can be fixed, a system that can be fixed. And overall, he said assault weapon bans do not work. So you have two contrasting sides here, and this is something that you can focus on when you go to make your vote for president. And now we get on to the Deflategate saga. I'm sick of hearing it, I'm sure you are too. But Tom Brady, he's gonna have to make a decision if he wants to reappeal Deflategate. The court ruled in a 2-1 ruling recently that Commissioner Roger Goodell was right to suspend Brady for 4 games in his actions in the AFC 2015 games for inflating footballs. And the Patriots' first 4 games will be against the Cardinals, the Dolphins, Texans, and the Bills. So overall, a lot of the players have taken to this, and they've said, Drew Brees, quarterback of the Saints, has said, I think we would all agree that the commissioner has too much power. And overall, now you have the courts siding with Goodell because it is probably something to do with a contract, a player contract clause, whereas the courts can't get involved with things that are signed by players. And that's where Roger Goodell probably has too much power. And in a last story to wrap up, Massachusetts Senate will be debating a $39.5 billion state budget plan. This will be happening earlier this week. The Massachusetts Senate they're going to increase spending on local schools and public higher education. And what's kind of new to this is you're going to have a fight against opiate addiction that is going to have increased revenue this year. And there will be no taxes and fees or any increases based off this. You'll also have homeless families. You'll have money to combat elder abuse and other things such as helping homeless children. So that's your news for Ryan's recap. We're going to take a quick PSA break. When I come back, we're going to have a human rights activist who's going to talk about Malcolm X, whose birthday was earlier this week. So stay tuned.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family?
This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry.
Go long, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
What are you, superheroes?
Just 4 brothers who hate bullies and love this city. Gear up, guys.
Welcome back to Ryan's Recap, and I'm very excited to say I have Sam Greaves with me. She's an activist for kind of overall black culture, and she also is very passionate in these issues. And we have her on today because we're talking about Malcolm X. Just last week, Malcolm X, it would have been his 91st birthday. So it's an issue that involves the world today, and we're going to show a video about how it relates, mainly through police brutality, but we're going to listen to Malcolm X, and this is a speech, I remind you, that was 50 plus years ago, and you'll see the comparisons. Sam, you want to add anything to that regarding that video we're about to see?
I just feel as though this video is very relatable to a lot of things going on today, even though it was given over 50 years ago, especially with cases such as Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, and Michael Brown.
All right, let's take a look at that video.
So if you want to investigate something, find out why they stopped building Harlem Hospital. There were people in Harlem fighting hard for a long time to get that hospital built. Had a hard time getting the white man even to start it. Then when they finally started on it, and there's nothing you need in Harlem more than a hospital, because you're sick, and you just got cut, or you're just getting ready to cut someone else. And we needed that hospital. So all these people had a brainstorm. They got up there and picketed and demonstrated, and the white man took away all the workers, stopped to work. As someone said earlier this afternoon, they're still being paid, and the hospital is not going up. Your money, the money you pay out in taxes, is paying the white construction workers who are sitting at home doing nothing. This is some brainstorm that someone got off the track on. When they tried to stop the construction of the hospital in Brooklyn, couldn't stop it. Because that hospital is for white people, primarily, and you are not going to stop construction where the white man is to benefit. The only thing you're going to stop is something right here in Harlem. But what really stopped the work up there, too many of y'all was out there, and the white man is afraid of you. Long as the line up there was, Cora originally started the picketing, and there were more whites picketing than blacks. Nobody was worried. Plus, they started picketing on a cool day, and our people don't come out when it's cool. It was on a Wednesday, I think, and it was cool. And then on a Thursday, everybody came out there. They weren't demonstrating, but they came out there as spectators. And when all these black people, as spectators, began to stand there and watch, they were afraid. Because they knew that with the picketers picketing, any little thing could happen. And even though you don't want to integrate, if the white man started beating some integrationist heads across the street, you couldn't stand there and watch it. Your nature wouldn't let you do it. And this is what would make you explode. He knows that. So he stopped the building of the hospital, but they have not been successful in bringing a halt to any other construction in the city of New York outside of Harlem. So if they really meant good, they could have stopped that building over there in Brooklyn. In fact, you can bring a halt to all the construction in New York City if those preachers are really for real. All they got to do is take all their congregation and take them down to Times Square. Tie it up. Now, I'm not talking Muslims aren't going to do this, but go and do something. And don't care what it costs. Don't care what the penalty or the price is. When you know you're right, you're right. And if you're not willing to go all the way, don't even start. Get on out of the line. Get on out of the battle. And that's another reason why we don't picket with you. As Reverend said, we're not nonviolent. We have demonstrated. We pull a demonstration. But when we demonstrate, if you ever see us fall out in a demonstration, we are ready to die, or we're ready to see that someone else dies. I don't mean no turn the other cheek. This is the only reason that we don't become involved in these nonviolent demonstrations. It's not fair to walk up to a man nonviolently and he got a club in his hand. You're out of your mind. So you should check and find out what started, what stopped, who is behind. And one of the leading men I saw out there that day was a white man named Herbert Hill. Herbert Hill is the labor secretary for NAACP. Now, if Herbert Hill, a white man holding a top position in the NAACP, can come to Harlem and stop the building of a hospital that's for the benefit of black people, if that white liberal really has your welfare at heart, let him go downtown and stop some of these other construction sites. And until these white liberals, or white people, who call themselves liberals, can go into their own neighborhood and stop construction, don't let them come in Harlem and start telling you what to do. No, when you want, if they want some action, you give them some action. And you'll bring about a change in the entire direction of your program and of your struggle, and you'll get a job done. We want every black man and woman to have freedom, the freedom to accept or reject being separated from the slave master's children and establish a land of our own. And that's what he says, give all of us freedom of choice. First, give every one of the 20 million black people in this country an opportunity to hear the truth. Let them be taught the truth about the white man and the truth about the black man. Let them be taught the truth about God and the truth about the devil. Let them be taught the truth about heaven and the truth about hell. And once they know the truth, then give them a chance to make a decision. But don't take this poor, dumb, deaf, and blind, ignorant, brainwashed, so-called Negro and ask him what he wants. He doesn't know what he wants. And because he doesn't know what he wants, he tries to integrate with a blue-eyed wolf. Don't you know anytime you see some sheep trying to integrate with wolves, those sheep are sick. Those sheep are out of their mind. And a sheep got more chance with a wolf than you got integrated with a white man. Why, a wolf can't be as hard on a sheep as the white man has been on you here in America. We want an immediate end to the police brutality and mob attacks against the so-called Negro throughout the United States. Yes, a complete end to the police brutality and mob attacks that our people are confronted by every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year across the land. Brother, show me those. You got those pictures? Brother, grab that picture of Brother Ronald. Let me show you what I mean by police brutality and mob attacks. Come over here with that. Here is a man, a Korean vet. This is a black man, a Korean vet. Went to war in Korea fighting for America. Risked his life fighting for America. And came back to this country and was shot down by the white man like a dog. Not some Ku Klux Klansman down in Mississippi. This black man was shot through the heart by policemen in Los Angeles, California. And they are dumb enough to think we have forgotten it. We are Muslim, never forget. You don't kill our brother. We don't never forget. You don't shoot one of us and then grin in our face. You don't shoot one of us and then shake our hands and think we forget it. No, we never forget. We'll never forget. Someone has to pay. Somewhere, somehow, someone has to pay. When a snake bites your children, you don't go and look for the snake that has blood on his jaws. Any old snake will do. Any old snake will do. They shot him through the heart. And as he lay dying on the sidewalk, they beat that hole in his head with police clubs. Not in Mississippi, but in Los Angeles, California. Not in the South, right there in the North, in the West. Here it shows men, black men, laying all over the sidewalk, shot down by police bullets. Not men who were guilty of some crime, not men who were drunk, not men who attacked anyone, but they shot their way into our mosque. Shot their way into our religious sanctuary and got the audacity to walk around here talking about this is a country based upon the principles of freedom of religion and freedom of worship and freedom of speech. This country is based upon nothing but hypocrisy and is based upon nothing but the right of white people to mutilate and shoot down black people. This is the brutality that we're talking about. This is the crime that we're talking about. And you say we teach hate. What kind of hate are we teaching? We're telling you what happens to black people. And this man didn't get shot down because he was a Muslim. They didn't ask him what his religion was. They saw that he was black and they began to fire point blank. And then when they went to court, these Gestapo, they were the criminals. They didn't go to court. They charged him. He's a dead man. And they charged him with a crime. But these Negroes here, shot down, were charged with a crime. And you haven't heard anybody open their mouth about it. You wonder why you're having trouble in this country. You're having trouble because the devil is on the rampage. A blue-eyed devil is on the rampage. A heartless devil is on the rampage. A beast is on the rampage. And you haven't got sense enough to know how to handle him. So we don't try and handle him. God is going to handle him. We ask God to give him justice. We ask God to trap him. We ask God to catch him. We ask God to deal with him. And we pray that God deals with more of them day after day. And what ones God don't get, we'll get them.
An amazing video, such a passionate speaker he really is, and just overall, we're going to get into this topic a lot more, but we have a second video we want to back that up with, and it's based off revolution. I personally don't feel like America's on a verge of we're going to have an outbreak of a revolution, because we have problems and we have to address them. But overall, it was a different time then, and I don't know if the tension's that high. But we're going to listen to this, and we're going to listen closely just to get a sense of the anger and what people were feeling, at least back then, and how it compares to today. You have anything briefly you want to say about this?
So basically in this video, he talks about like a revolution, how there really needs to be a change within the society, and it's still, like the last one, relevant to today, and how blacks should defend themselves and act when faced with this oppression that's plaguing their society.
All right, so we're going to take a look at this video.
I would like to make a few comments concerning the difference between the Black Revolution and the Negro Revolution. There's a difference. Are they both the same? And if they're not, what is the difference? What is the difference between a Black Revolution and a Negro Revolution? First, what is a revolution? Sometimes I'm inclined to believe that many of our people are using this word revolution loosely, without taking careful consideration what this word actually means and what its historic characteristics are. When you study the historic nature of revolutions, the motive of a revolution, the objective of a revolution, and the result of a revolution, and the methods used in a revolution, you may change words. You may devise another program. You may change your goal, and you may change your mind. Look at the American Revolution in 1776. That revolution was for what? For land. How was it? Why did they want land? Independence. How was it carried out? Bloodshed. Number one, it was based on land, the basis of independence. And the only way they could get it was bloodshed. The French Revolution, what was it based on? The landless against the landlord. What was it for? Land. How did they get it? Bloodshed. Was no love lost. Was no compromise. Was no negotiation. I'm telling you, you don't know what a revolution is. Because when you find out what it is, you'll get back in the alley. You'll get out of the way. Come on in. The Russian Revolution. What was it based on? Land. The landless against the landlord. How did they bring it about? Bloodshed. You haven't got a revolution that doesn't involve bloodshed. And you're afraid to bleed. I saw if you're afraid to bleed. Long as the white man sent you to Korea, you bled. He sent you to Germany, you bled. He sent you to the South Pacific to fight the Japanese, you bled. You bleed for white people. But when it comes time to seeing your own churches being bombed and little black girls murdered, you haven't got no blood. You bleed when the white man says bleed. You bite when the white man says bite. And you bark when the white man says bark. I hate to say this about us, but it's true. How you going to be nonviolent in Mississippi as violent as you were in Korea? How can you justify being nonviolent in Mississippi and Alabama when your churches are being bombed and your little girls are being murdered, and at the same time you're going to get violent with Hitler and Tojo and somebody else that you don't even know? If violence is wrong in America, violence is wrong abroad. If it's wrong to be violent, defending black women and black children and black babies and black men, then it's wrong for America to draft us and make us violent abroad in defense of her. And if it is right for America to draft us and teach us how to be violent in defense of her, then it is right for you and me to do whatever is necessary to defend our own people right here in this country.
The landless versus the landlord. And we're going to go over both of these videos, but isn't it just amazing the overall illusion of like how passed down through these times, it still kind of fits today, both of these videos.
It is amazing, and you wouldn't think so many years have gone by, so many strides that have been made within the Black community, that these issues are still just so prevalent in our society.
Yes, and we're going to start with the first video where he kind of mentions about police brutality. And the main thing I want to talk about is what Malcolm X is speaking about. Is it really to the extent happening that it was back then, this police brutality?
I feel like if you don't remember history, it will repeat itself. So you could say, oh, it's not to the extent, to the exact extent as it was happening years ago, but it's still, I don't know, it's still bad. And it could, you know what, in some places here, it could even be worse it could even be worse, and we might just be able to see it more with the technology that we have. Back then, they didn't have iPhones to capture it. Like, we have videos ready to capture anything that's going on. So I want to say that it is the same. Yep, it is the same as it was going on. But now we just are able to capture it more.
Yeah, maybe a little less violence in a sense, just because you have, in a way, a control today like no other over protests, over rioting. But you mentioned about cell phones and things like technology, and I wonder if we're using it correctly, because you see all the broadcasting packages after, and you see the rioters in Ferguson, Missouri, and people throwing things, breaking things, and you're depicting people through showing that kind of media. So then you have, I've heard 100 times over from people who go, oh, look at the protesters acting up. They shouldn't be doing that against police. But they don't see now the essence of why they're so built up. So
Exactly.
Just getting into that, why is that? Well, why is it we have all this technology, but yet we're not seeing the overall message? Is it something where we've been missing through all these years?
Well, I feel as though for years that the media has the ability to flip things around and depict people the way that they personally want them to be depicted. So blacks are often depicted in the media, and this has been going on for years and years, as criminals, as violent, as angry people. And the reason why there is some of this anger, if you're treated like dirt or treated like an animal for so long that the anger builds up and you have to express it, and it's a desperate attempt to try to get the point across, like, we need this equality, and we need to be, I mean, we're Americans, so we should be treated and have all the rights as every American would. And I feel as though it's just the way that it's flipped and depicted. There are positive portrayals of blacks that are like used with technology, and there are positive portrayals, but the mainstream news stations don't show them. And it's basically all the stations that have the money and the stations that have the funding are mostly white owned, and they're mostly white owned, and you know, they're in charge. The white businessmen who own the stations are in charge of what goes on the station.
Yeah, and that's something he mentioned in the speech. He said the white supremacy still lingering over us. And is it something where, even in the revolution video where he says, he mentions a lot of times bloodshed, and I don't know if that's the right way to ever go about things, but is that the way that things change, that revolutions happen? Is this what it comes down to?
I mean, I feel like lately there has been a lot of bloodshed. And I mean, over 100 blacks in 2015 were killed by police officers. So, and there's still a lot of violence going on. So there is a lot of bloodshed, but I feel like it's tough to say because there should be more communication and there should be more open dialogue and understanding created in order for these problems to subside. And the bloodshed that he talks about in the video also goes along with how blacks in the military were out there fighting for our country and fighting to protect everybody back home, but yet these blacks go back home and they're being treated like they're the enemy. And that can be very hard, like putting your life out there for your country and your country's not here supporting you.
Yeah, actually, history repeats itself, as you said, where people from Vietnam would come back and they were shunning the shoulder towards them. So it's definitely an issue, but overall, are we even talking something a little bit bigger here? Is it just the black race, or is it all races today? Have we maybe grown to a bigger situation here that's even past what Malcolm X is referencing?
I feel like it is a bigger situation, and they say that the U.S. is almost becoming more segregated than it was in the 1950s. I feel like people tend to segregate themselves, and I feel like this happens with all races too. I feel like there just needs to be more intertwining. People need to learn more about different cultures and about just different things. Just, I don't know, learn about different cultures and sort of get out there and see what things may look like from the other side of another person's view, like the other side of the neighborhood.
Well, you mentioned a view, and one of the things is, obviously, you probably have a different perspective from mine. Do you have anything off of personal perspective that you want to relate to this? Yeah,
so I went to an international high school. I was not the only black student there, but in my middle school, I was the only black student there. And so I had things said to me that were very derogatory, like not very nice. But at first I would get very angry and very like, oh, well, why are they treating me this way? Why would they say some of these things to me? But then I learned, like, through education and through just talking to somebody and saying, hey, this is my experience, how I feel, this is what's going on. And some people don't know. And so rather than to go off on somebody sometimes, it's good to teach them and say, hey, listen, this is how things are. Like, teach history and know your history as well. And going to an international high school really helped me because I knew not only about black culture myself, but I learned about Chinese culture, Vietnamese culture, Spanish culture, Indian culture, tons of different types of cultures. And that when we learned about each other's cultures and got to know each other, we saw, okay, you do things a certain way, but at the end of the day, we're all still human, and we're really not all that different.
Mm-hmm. And you seem to take more of an action maybe through words is what I'm kind of getting a little. So overall, with things like Ferguson, Missouri, and these protests and rallies, what is it that there should be a strive for future rallies? Because so many times these rallies seem to get out of hand, and then it's just criminals who raid the city, and it almost loses its meaning in that whole aspect. So what would overall kind of correct that kind of view when there are protests?
I feel like there should, honestly, for me, education is the biggest thing. I feel like the message needs to be put out there. And I also feel like Blacks shouldn't feel like they have to assimilate and to be, oh, well, we have to, like some Blacks will act white. No, it doesn't need to be that. I feel like, but there should be teaching. There should, but without our culture being lost. And that can be hard to do because of cultural appropriation and gentrification. Like sometimes, like we have this culture and we'll have, you know, something that is like, oh, like Blacks came up with this. It's almost like our art. And it ends up getting lost or taken away from us, we feel like, by whites and other cultures. And in a way, it becomes diminuized. It's like, oh, this isn't what represents us. So I feel like there's a loss sometimes. It's like, what is Black culture? What is just our own and something we can be completely proud of?
Yeah, that's a very insightful comment right there. Overall, Malcolm X, he kind of, he was a brilliant speaker, brilliant guy, knew his history.
Yeah, definitely.
Very much.
Yeah.
And overall, he did take the perspective that kind of scared a few people away back then, even with how revolutionized he was with his ideas and saying, we will, you know, basically fight this head on. And with that, I'm just saying, are we in a part of America today that could be a revolution? Is what he says in that video, are we still in that revolution?
I feel like our generation, for instance, I feel like we are one of the most open-minded generations. And I feel like we can get to a place where there is a revolution and there is like equality, but there are still a lot of steps we need to take. And I feel like, honestly, gentrification, like I mentioned before, sometimes it can be a bad thing because, you know, Blacks are being pushed out of what is historically their neighborhood. But in a sense, in some ways, it can be a good thing because different races are now coming together and seeing each other. I mean, whites are seeing Blacks in what is their neighborhood, like their environment, and they're learning more about it, and they can maybe, instead of being scared and like, oh, like I'm in the Black neighborhood, they can gain an understanding and an appreciation of the neighborhood and see the history behind it. So because gentrification is becoming so like relevant, becoming so prevalent today, that all right, maybe we can get to a point in time where there is just complete equality. And some magazines too, they have like Teen Vogue has its youngest and first Black editor-in-chief now, which is really exciting. So it's like, okay, we are making the strides, but we also have a long way to go.
Right. And you kind of mentioned how you have people of color and people together a little more than ever today. And we even have Obama, a Black president. We've made strides. But then I want to take it to another perspective where Malcolm X kind of talked about the hospital in Harlem and the resources and how there's still the control overall by the white, and it's kind of a lack of funds for so many of these neighborhoods, so many of these communities. And now, maybe even with the mixed cultures coming together, it's taking a toll on more races than ever.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, has always, I feel like, been a lack of funding and a lack of resources in Black neighborhoods. And for instance, I took a course, a human service course on addiction because I had an interest in it. I was like, oh, why not? And if you're a person of color, even here in Boston, sometimes they don't admit you into certain places where they can get their rehabilitation, inpatient housing. Sometimes you're not allowed into that inpatient rehabilitation housing. So it's still difficult. And, you know, even schooling, my family chose to put me in I'm so sorry. My family chose to put me in private schooling because just the schooling in the neighborhoods wasn't as good. And you see Newton, one of the richest cities in Massachusetts, has the best educational system, and it's also it's predominantly white. So it all goes to show that basically the whiter neighborhoods have the better educational systems, like places to go, all of that. So there should be more buildup in Black communities, but without Blacks being pushed out.
Right. And you've explained how this could revolutionize itself through education, but it's kind of a constant pattern here where you have lack of resources. You have kids today who grow up in Compton or some very rough area, and all they know is street life, and then you end up uneducated, and they don't even know about half the problems going on around them.
Yeah.
So now you have a constant rotation. This has happened for years and years, and we've never gotten off of this because it's almost like a higher power or something is keeping it down. Because, I mean, this is kind of the question I'm getting towards. Are they really scared to have these people all educated?
Oh, definitely. I feel like that can be terrifying to have, like, because then Blacks will come in and it's the same constant worry that's been going on for on and up, like years. It's like, they'll take our jobs. Then we'll be like, we might be the lesser race and stuff like that. So I feel like it's a fear that white culture won't be on top anymore if Blacks are receiving the same education. And it's pretty sad. And it's just this never-ending cycle. And the only way it can truly be broken, in my opinion, is through education. And that's how come it's harder for these kids in these neighborhoods to get this sort of education. That's why they make it so difficult for them, and they don't have this funding in these communities.
I'm going to take a transition here, and we're going to go into a little more of the police brutality. So you have cases over the past few years now, Michael Brown, you have Trayvon Martin cases, and that wasn't police brutality, but that was citizen on citizen. And it's something where it's brought the communities almost against a higher law enforcement, and this is a very tense situation. You have situations like Ferguson where police and the Black people are rioting and clashing. So overall, is it something where we can heal this? Can we fix this? Is there always going to be this stigma between this higher enforcement that might not even be the police? It could be the multimillionaires who are giving the resources down to the poor communities. So is this ever going to heal this thing? Because it's something sad where it's happening with local communities, and you're fighting with your local policeman, and you're fighting that ticket, and it's coming up more than ever, I think, today, right now.
It is. I feel like one day it could heal, but I feel like maybe if there were more Blacks who were policemen, who were in these positions of power, then it could truly be healed. But for now, there aren't enough of them. And it really, like I said, all goes back to education. Well, they're not getting the education they need to be in these positions, and they're not getting hired into these positions. And sometimes they have the education, but they aren't hired in these positions because certain companies are like, okay, we don't want too many Black people in this position. And so it is great that Blacks are still taking a stand. We're still having these rallies and saying, hey, listen, this needs to stop, but ultimately there needs to be more just more blacks in those positions. And then I feel like more of an understanding will be created and there would be less police brutality and police violence. But right now it's pretty bad. I don't feel like it'll happen anytime within the next 5-10 years.
You have the Black Lives Matter movement, and you have a lot of, actually that's probably the education that and the awareness that communities are looking for a lot. And overall, with that said, what does that mean to you, that they're coming together around a movement like that you're seeing such big support for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's great, and I feel like that's a positive way that we're using social media to have like trending topics like Black Lives Matter and get the discussion going. There's also one that I'm really for too called it's called Say Her Name, and that's surrounded by the Sandra Bland case where Sandra Bland died in police custody, and they say that it was officers who killed her, and she was arrested for assaulting a policeman, where she really didn't assault him. There was a video, I believe, too. She just was stopped. It was like an average traffic ticket. And so there are plenty of black women also dying in police custody. So I'm glad that they have both of those that I know talked a lot about on social media, and that's a great way to get the message out and use the media for positives and have black people speak in a positive way and say, hey, listen, like, look at this. Big news stations are showing us in this light, but we can paint ourselves in this light using social media, which is a huge outlet and a huge way news is carried out.
And this is kind of a recent story. I'm not sure if you actually knew that there was an Auburn police officer who was recently shot, and it was a traffic stop, and he approached the car, and the man unloaded several bullets, and he ended up dying. And there's the mother came out after her son died, and she said, overall, the statement was that there's such a disrespect for police today, and that she doesn't understand it. And she's trying to build up, in a way, her own movement, saying we need to come together. But just overall, what do you feel about that recent news that you have a mother who's reaching out in her own way, saying, why don't we come together? And why is there such violence, and why does this have to happen? When you see it from that perspective, do you have a comment on that?
I feel like going back to the Malcolm X video about the bloodshed that we previously discussed, there's always going to be that violence, because violence happens, I feel like, out of fear. Every time there's violence, every time there's just automatic bloodshed before there's communication, it's just the fear is unleashed. They're like, you know what, we're just going to shoot, we're going to do this, and we're not going to just talk it out. It's like, oh, well, our lives over theirs sort of type thing. It's like, this has happened, so we can automatically feel protected and feel like we're not in fear. So I feel like that's why there is this continuous bloodshed, and I feel like that's why things do happen that way until we get to a point where there's not so much fear, and fear of just different cultures, because I feel like black people as well can fear white culture just because the way we've been treated by whites in the past. So the fear has to be eradicated in order for there not to be so much violence, and not to police to automatically be like, oh, shoot, before discussion, or like automatically assume that, oh, it's a black person, there will be violence.
Yeah, let me follow up on that. Who do you think is more fearful of the other? If you had to think it through, is it the black people are protesting and outraged because they're fearful of their future, of what's going on around them? Yeah. Or is it more whites being afraid of the fear of the black people coming up in communities?
I definitely would say it's whites being more fearful of blacks, like being in their community and coming up in their community. And I say that not because, oh, I myself am black, is because of the way history has gone through, like over the years, like blacks moving into whiter communities to give their children a better education. They had their lawns being set on fire, the Ku Klux Klan like setting crosses on fire in their lawn, having rocks thrown through their windows. It's just, we've seen this so many times. And for blacks just doing simple, like doing little things like moving to a new house or, you know, maybe getting a new job position. I feel like there's fear. People don't like change. And when things are different, it can be very scary, just in general. So to have, oh, blacks have always been on the bottom, like living in their own communities, doing this, having, you know, the usual stereotypes, all of a sudden be changed by a majority of that minority group. I feel like that can be scary for whites, and scarier for whites than it would be for blacks.
Yeah, and you can always see it a little in the sense of the hesitation over police automobiles and police body cams having like, cameras in their cars. And overall, I would figure you're for something like that, but I guess add a little more into that. What do you feel about police having always a camera on them?
I believe that they should. And honestly, the police, yes, they do. I feel like they do target these minority groups, but also younger people too. I feel like the police treat younger people sometimes in a way that's disrespectful, or they think, oh, well, they're young, like I have authority over them regardless. So I think it would be great for officers to have that technology on them. And then if a black person is the one being aggressive and starting the violence, they would be able to see it on the video camera. So the truth would be present. No matter what the story is, no matter what the situation, the truth would always be present. So I think that would be a great idea for our society to have that.
Yes, and the violence overall, it's a big issue with race and discrimination. And I believe that the violence back in 1950s overall, when Malcolm X was speaking in a lot of these videos, it was worse then. But is our violence just through the videos you see? They're so graphic today.
Yeah.
Things that they're holding Michael Brown on the ground until and maybe it's a visual impact that you're seeing more today, but it's something where, I guess, let's get into a little bit, why is it that it feels so much more like in here?
I really do believe it is the visual impact, like just the technology that we have to capture it. Like when you see a video of a young boy like on the ground like that, when you see a video of that, there's always more of an impact than reading it in a newspaper. Like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I feel like a video sometimes could be worth 1,000 more. It's just a lot, seeing it, having it captured like that, it touches you more. And I feel like nowadays, like we seem like, oh, all of this is still happening. I feel worse things, and things were happening back then, yeah, and maybe even worse things, but we weren't able to capture it, so we weren't being able to see it. The reason why it's becoming so big today, and you feel like you're hearing like all of this, like, oh, another boy shot, this and that, it's because we have the technology to capture it, and we have things like social media where people take a video, put it straight on their social media.
I actually have to wrap you up, but overall, with technology, there should be change. I want to thank my crew. I want to thank overall the people backstage. They've been great today. And shout out to Morley Safer. He passed away. I just remember growing up watching him on 60 Minutes. And an outstanding journalist, and may he rest in peace. Until next time, I'm Ryan Chevalier.